Another month, another Everything I Watched, this time February edition. I watched a lot of movies this month, mainly movies to catch up on all of the Oscar nominations, but I watched a couple others just for fun. Let's get into it. I started off the month with The Beekeeper, and I had a lot of fun with this one. And if Jason Statham playing a deadly covert agent known as a beekeeper who retires to become an actual beekeeper sounds interesting to you, I think you'll have fun with it too. It's filled with cheesy bee puns like to be or not to be. I thought the villains were actually pretty compelling. You get to live out the revenge fantasy of Jason Statham murdering the universe's most hated people imaginable, scam callers. And the third act takes this movie into a genuinely unexpected and unhinged direction that I definitely won't spoil here. Now don't get me wrong, I don't want to give this movie too much praise. The action is serviceable and it really is just a typical January action movie, albeit one that feels really self-aware. I don't necessarily need The Beekeeper 2, but if Jason Statham wanted to make, say, The Dog Catcher, who warns villains that he's going to take them to the pound, which is a kill shelter, well, buy me my tickets right now. And then I saw Argylle, which is not as fun. I feel like the twisted mind of Matthew Vaughn came out strong right out of the gate with movies like Layer Cake, Stardust, Kick-Ass, The First Kingsman, First Class, and then he really went over the edge into mediocrity. And his latest release is also his dullest to date. I basically had no fun with Argylle, which through its script direction and editing somehow managed to suck all of the charisma out of its very charismatic cast like Sam Rockwell, Bryce Dallas Howard, and Henry Cavill. This thing cost $200 million and it looks genuinely garish. The first set piece in the movie takes place in a fictional world inside the book that the main character writes, so I cut it some slack for looking so cartoonish and unrealistic, but then the rest of the movie looks just as bad and hokey. They also make the truly terrible decision to cut back and forth in hand-to-hand fight sequences between Sam Rockwell and Henry Cavill, which really just chops it up into nothingness. It's hard to follow, it kind of made me nauseated. There are two action sequences in the final act that kind of go off the rails in a way that I found at least to be a little more compelling in how cartoonish and off the wall they are. Are they good? I don't know if I'd go that far, but at least I was interested. But then the movie ends with some final twists and reveals that are so head-scratchingly confusing that I don't know what I just watched. I don't want an Argylle 2, but I kind of need one to tell me what the heck just happened? And then I rewatched Fargo. This is an absolute classic from the Coen brothers, mixing violent crime, dark comedy, and absurd mundanity. Every single character with even just a single line in this movie feels perfect and fully realized. The dialogue is impeccable and every actor is in top form. Frances McDormand is so good as the lead cop, and I really love how simple and realistic and earnest they keep her relationship with her husband, even if it is such a minor part of the movie. William H. Macy was on a real roll during this period in the 90s, playing such compelling sad sack losers in this, Boogie Nights, and Magnolia. And let's be honest, any movie or TV show is instantly made better by those incredible Minnesotan accents. Fargo is a movie that finds that perfect resting spot in the tension between comedy and tragedy. The burst of shocking, abrupt, and brutal violence are always balanced out by the hilarity of genuine human error. The plot feels loose and shaggy, with characters sort of stumbling their way toward the climax, but in retrospect, it's pretty perfectly and meticulously crafted. Unfortunately, I can't say the same for Drive Away Dolls, the solo feature debut of Ethan Coen. This movie follows a pair of lesbian friends who take a road trip together in a car that they don't realize secretly carries a MacGuffin that some very bad people want. This is a movie that has all of the hallmarks of a classic Coen brothers film, but it just feels like it's missing something. It's got the usual snappy Coen brothers dialogue, but it's just not as sharp. It's got a great ensemble cast and some fun characters, but none of them really stand out above the rest. It's got a shaggy, loose plot that unfortunately ends up feeling pretty aimless. I didn't hate it because even Walmart brand Coen brothers is enough flavor to keep me satisfied, but I didn't really love it and left disappointed. I feel like both brothers' independent outputs since their breakup prove that one is all form and the other function, and they need each other to make a cohesive, great film. and hopefully that reunion is sooner rather than later. And then I watched The Zone of Interest. Jonathan Glazer's newest film is based on a German family who lived next to Auschwitz during World War II. The patriarch of the family is the commander of the concentration camp, but the film never follows him inside. Instead, Glazer focuses on the ordinary and mundane lives of this family, all the while the audience brings in the outside context of the atrocities that fund their lifestyle. As the children play in their backyard, other children can be heard screaming for their lives just over the wall. As this family sits down for dinner together, gunshots can be heard just in the distance. It's powerful, sinister, and heartbreaking for all the things it doesn't show, but still implants in the viewer's mind. Seemingly innocuous moments can take on heartbreaking implications due to the context, like an older brother locking his younger sibling in a greenhouse. I love the way Glazer opens this film in total darkness, preparing the audience to pay attention to what they hear. He also shoots most of the film in wide shots, as if the audience are voyeurs observing the action from the outside. It's deeply unsettling, like we're seeing something we shouldn't be seeing. But that's also what makes it timeless and prescient. We need to feel uncomfortable, and we need to see how easy it can be to ignore atrocities happening right outside our windows. It's a sobering wake-up call to not stand idle and allow evil to take root. Next, I watched The Teacher's Lounge, which is about the struggles of a public school teacher, exploring not only the difficulties of managing the demons that are Gen Z middle schoolers, but also the political hierarchy of the fellow faculty members. The performances are all really great. Leonie Benesch is a revelation for me as the teacher Carla, who finds herself way over her head trying to juggle the conflicting dynamics thrown at her. And it's a genuine miracle they managed to cast an entire middle school's class worth of child actors that knock it out across the board. The framing, editing, and music are all superb and make this simple story feel like a really tense and engaging pressure cooker. I do think this movie goes off the rails a little bit in the second half, with some plot developments that veer out of realism and go into more broad insanity. I was left struggling to understand if I was just a dumb American who didn't understand dry German satire, or if the movie just actually wasn't self-aware of how unrealistic some of its plot developments became. Thankfully, the film's final shot, which literally plays over the end credits, seemed to clear things up for me that it is self-aware, so I will give it the benefit of the doubt. Either way, I found this really entertaining and I give it a recommend. And then I watched Perfect Days. Wim Wenders' newest film is a thoughtful and meditative look at the life of a toilet cleaner in Japan. You wouldn't think watching a man clean toilets for 2 hours would be as beautiful and thought-provoking as this is, but that's kind of the magic trick of this movie. The main character, Hirayama, played with a quiet perfection by Koji Yakusho, is often ignored, overlooked, and even looked down on by the people he encounters throughout his day. And yet he is a character filled with eternal optimism. He has his daily routines, he finds comfort and peace in them. He's passionate and attentive in his work, he lets the setbacks roll off his back. I feel like no matter who you are or where you are in your life, it can be easy to fall into a cycle of wanting more and not being appreciative for the blessings you've been given. Perfect Days is a celebration of those blessings, and it's one that's sure to stick with me while I'm in the tedium of editing a video and wondering what is my life. Next, I rewatched The Holdovers, and I've given my thoughts on this movie before. I loved it. I talk about it in my top 10 movies of 2023 video, so check that out if you want some more fuller thoughts from me on this, but it remains an instant classic for me, one I'm sure to revisit every year. It's a movie about finding empathy for other people. You never know what people are going through, so leading with compassion is always the answer. I love this one. It's great, it's heartwarming, it's hilarious. Check it out if you haven't. And then I watched 20 Days in Mariupol, which is the frontrunner to win the Best Documentary Feature at this year's Oscars. But it's also pretty hard to judge it on its artistic merits as a film. This is more of an extremely important historical document than it is a traditional documentary narrative. The film's director Mislav Chernov is a Ukrainian filmmaker and journalist who was on the ground in the city of Mariupol during the first 20 days of Russia's invasion. What you get here is a pretty linear and unflinching look at the very real and graphic atrocities inflicted upon the innocent people of Ukraine, shot with the explicit purpose of showing these horrors to the rest of the world and documenting these war crimes for historical evidence. There's children dying, parents wailing in despair, bullets flying, bombs dropping, neighbors robbing neighbors, and strangers risking their lives to save others. As babies bleed out on screen, a doctor begs Chernov to keep filming so that the world can see the tragic casualties of Putin's heartless invasion. This thing is filled with unflinchingly chilling and traumatizing imagery that I won't soon forget. As a historical document, I think this is an incredibly vital piece of media, although it does feel more like a very special news report than it does an artfully crafted film. Then I watched all of the nominated documentary shorts, which were pretty varying in quality. The Barber of Little Rock follows a man named Arlo Washington who not only runs a barber school to help create careers for the people in his community, but also founded and runs a nonprofit community bank, which gives out small business loans to people without letting their potentially bad credit be a hindrance to their future economic success. It's a great story. Arlo seems like a great guy, but the film itself is pretty surface level. There's no real exploration for why the system or government has failed this community, leading it to need a single man like Arlo to take this on himself. There's not enough of the community, period, as it's mostly a collection of sound bites for why Arlo's work is so important and impactful. I think the next documentary short I watched, Island in Between, falls into a similar rut. This film's director S. Leo Chang documents his family's life on the island of Kinmen, which is located directly in between China and Taiwan. Chang attempts to connect his own family's history with the history of the contentious political relationship between China and Taiwan. And that's a fascinating subject to explore from a director who is uniquely situated to document it from a perspective that literally no one else has. And yet, once again, the whole thing feels super surface level and rote. I didn't need this thing to go full 20 days in Mariupol, but I would have appreciated at least a little more insight into the daily struggles of the innocent people caught literally in the middle of this conflict. Next up for me was the ABCs of book banning, which I thought was a big step up in the documentary shorts field. This one takes a look at the wide variety of books that have been restricted or banned in public schools for a number of questionable reasons. And this film actually has a take on the subject matter. The majority of its runtime is dedicated to interviewing kids about the various books that have been banned and letting them share their thoughts on how this impacts their generation. And these kids are awesome. They're inquisitive and empathetic and insightful. They understand better than the adults making these decisions that trying to hide from topics of racism, fascism, homophobia, classism, and more. We allow these ideologies to grow stronger. I do wish we could have balanced the kids' perspectives with some context from their adult counterparts to shine a light on the types of people making these decisions and how they were given that power in the first place. And then I watched Nai and Wai Po, which is a documentary short about director Sean Wang's maternal and paternal grandmothers, who have become best friends and roommates following the deaths of their respective husbands. It's a beautiful, charming, and hilarious ode to these women, and a gift for Sean's own future children and grandchildren to pass down. If you want to put a smile on your face, look no further than Nai and Wai Po. It's certainly the lightest subject matter of all of the documentary short nominees, but through the sheer artistry involved, it still manages to be one of the most effective. The cinematography in this thing is also gorgeous and stands head and shoulders above the other nominees. My only real complaint is that it feels a little too manufactured. Obviously, a director is going to have a list of beats they want to hit while making their film, but you can really feel the invisible hands at work on this one. Okay, now in this shot, Nai and Wai Po dance together. Okay, now Nai and Wai Po should banter back and forth. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but it does give this short a loosely scripted feel that conflicts with my own personal criteria for what this category and genre entails. The final nominated documentary short, and also the clear standout for me, is The Last Repair Shop. Apparently, the city of Los Angeles provides free instruments and instrument repairs to students in the public school system, and this film is about the team of workers who have dedicated their lives to repairing those instruments. I think the structure of this thing is great, with each of the 4 team members getting their own segment to tell their own life story and musical journey that brought them to where they are today, intercut with the stories of the children who benefit from their expertise and generosity. It's a celebration about the transformative power of music. It's perfectly crafted and genuinely heartwarming, and yeah, I shed a few tears by the end. I loved this one, and I think it stacks up with the overall best films of the year for me. Then I watched the Oscar-nominated animated short 95 Senses. This one features Tim Blake Nelson playing a narrator figure who regales about the 5 senses through a series of vignettes, with each sense having its its own unique art style. I don't want to spoil this one, but it actually takes some pretty surprising turns and goes down a much more compelling and interesting path than its logline might suggest. I really like this one, and I appreciated how bold its secret conceit is. It's worth a watch. And then I moved on to the live-action narrative shorts, leading me to rewatching Wes Anderson's The Wonderful Story of Henry Sugar. I almost feel like this category is completely unfair, as Henry Sugar is made by a renowned auteur at the height of his power, with all of the resources of Netflix's seemingly endless coffers, and an all-star cast featuring the likes of Benedict Cumberbatch, Ralph Fiennes, Dev Patel, Ben Kingsley, and Richard Ayoade. But also the Academy for some reason takes Wes Anderson's genius for granted, as proven by the lack of any technical award nominations for his very deserving most recent outing, Asteroid City. I think with Henry Sugar and all of the Roald Dahl shorts Wes Anderson made for Netflix last year, Anderson has crafted some of the most lovingly faithful and perfectly translated book-to-screen adaptations ever. It's a celebration of Roald Dahl's witty and insightful prose, as characters are literally reading out dialogue and scene directions directly to the audience. It's a wholly unique way to adapt a written story, and it's a perfect marriage with Wes Anderson's signature filmmaking style. The actors are delightful, the set designs are gorgeous, it's a home run full stop, and should be one of the easiest wins on Oscar night. But I have some pretty big concerns for this category that I want to get into. First, I want to talk about Night of Fortune, another live-action short that I actually really liked. It's about a grieving husband who loses his wife, the only form of human connection he has in his life. As he goes to the morgue to visit her body for a final time, he can't quite bring himself to say goodbye. And that's when he meets a fellow grieving widower, but this one a bit quirkier and more eccentric. These two strangers are able to form a bond over their shared heartbreak. It's a beautiful, simple movie with charming performances, tear-jerking moments, and even some dark humor to add some levity. It's everything you could possibly want in a film. And yet my fear is that both Night of Fortune and Henry Sugar will be unfairly overlooked in favor of one of the worst things I've seen in a very long time. And that brings me to The After. The After is produced by and stars David Oyelowo and is about a grieving father who is still struggling to cope with the tragic deaths of his wife and daughter a year prior. On paper, this sounds like the exact type of Oscar bait movie the Academy usually goes for, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. But after watching The After, I think on paper is the only way any member of the Academy ever experienced this film, because in practice, on screen, this film is a disaster and I hated it. It's so generic and overwrought and schmaltzy and hokey. If you told me this was a satire, I would tell you to tone it down. I hated this thing so much, and I want to go into more specific details, so if you don't want to be spoiled and you want to hate watch this movie for yourself, feel free to leave now. This is my final review of the video. Follow me on Letterboxd at Josh D. Floyd. I'll see you in the next one. But if you want to stick around, I'm about to spoil this movie and really get into it. So, it starts out with David Oyelowo as a workaholic father who's dropping off his young daughter with her mother to take her to her dance recital she's got that night. But the daughter is real cute and convinces him to dance with her, immediately making him agree to reschedule his business meeting to attend the dance recital with her that night. They meet up with the mom on this bridge overlooking some train tracks, and then the dad goes to make a phone call to his business partner saying they have to reschedule the business meeting because he has somewhere more important he has to be. And then a serial killer emerges, stabs the daughter, tosses her over the side of the bridge. The wife inexplicably jumps after her, leading to her death too. And this is all in the first 2 minutes of this movie. What is happening? It's insane. Cut to a year later, and the father is now a taxi driver, and the bulk of the film is him driving around his various clients. You get little windows into these strangers' lives and their seemingly inconsequential stories all drum up some sort of emotion from David Oyelowo, who they obviously have no idea is grieving such an immense loss. I think if this is where the film started, it would be much easier to tolerate. It's a decent concept to explore the themes of compassion and empathy, and you never really know what strangers are going through. And then the last act of this film has a family enter the taxi that is like the Wario version of David Oyelowo's family. There's a mother and father and young daughter, and the parents are bickering because the father works too much, but they're even more obnoxious and obviously hateable to the audience because they're the worst thing you could ever possibly be. social media influencers. The movie is hammering you over the head with this thought of stop worrying about how many likes your Instagram post has, appreciate your family, look at how cute your daughter is. They could be murdered by serial killers at any moment. And then David Oyelowo drops them off. The little girl hugs him because she can sense he's struggling with something, and he has a breakdown and is finally able to confront his grief. And then the movie ends with the cheesiest, on-the-nose, royalty-free soft rock ballad I've ever heard in my life. I don't know if you watch Love is Blind, but I do, and if you watch it, you know that a staple of that show is the corny, generic, royalty-free sounding music, and I'm convinced that the After and Love is Blind share the same music supervisor. It's a truly terrible movie, but if it wins the Oscar, they should make a sequel and have it be about my life, where a year from now I'm retired from talking about movies and TV shows for a living and living with the equally immense grief of having my faith in the Academy brutally murdered. But that's just like my opinion. Let me know yours in the comments below. Like this video, subscribe for more content like it, follow me on Letterboxd at Josh G. Floyd if you want my up-to-date takes on everything I watch in a month. Thanks for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one.